Sandyrios in the Morning on American Family Radio.
You heard at the top of the story, there's a new tweet this morning by the president bashing Attorney General Sessions again. Attorney General Sessions has taken a very weak position on Hillary Clinton crimes. Where are emails and DNC server and intel leakers? That's what the president is saying. Of course, I just read you the quote by General Sessions yesterday when he said that he's working as hard as he can. He still doesn't have any U.S. attorneys, and he doesn't have any of his aides confirmed by the Senate. And so I find myself wondering, I do wish General Sessions had not recused himself. That didn't make sense to me, but should he have or should he not have? Giuliani, who is now put aside as just a rumor. Giuliani has been discussed as a replacement for Sessions, but Giuliani defended Sessions and said, I would have recused myself as well under the rules of the Justice Department. So I find myself with lots of legal questions this morning, and I can't answer them, but I know the person that can. His name is Professor William Jacobson. He has joined us before. You will remember that he's a professor of law at Cornell University, graduate of Harvard. He is also the editor of Legal Insurrection, which is a blog, kind of a little bit of a rebellion against the current culture in the legal profession. Professor Jacobson, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Let me describe legal insurrection to our audience. Would that be something they would want to read, or is it just for people that are in the legal profession?
No, and I hope they do want to read it. It's probably more politics than law. We are not a legal website in the sense of technical sorts of law issues. It's more how law intersects with politics. So really, since it comes up every day, is something legal? Is it not legal? What's the law on this? So it's really a political website that deals with legal issues as they affect politics and vice versa.
All right. Well, this legal web we find ourselves in it's all interconnected. So I think the best way for us to discuss it is do it by personalities, because we have Senator Sessions, who recused himself, and then Rob Rosenstein, who then is the acting director on the Russia scandal, and he appoints Bob Muller, and then Bob Muller's appointed, as the special counsel, and then the thing is just going crazy. So all the news stories I've talked about prior to you joining me are sort of connected to that. Let's talk about Robert Mueller and his investigation as special counsel. You initially thought he was a good pick, didn't you?
I did. I thought it would seem that he would be fairly neutral. I do say I was cautious about it, and I said we need to see where it goes. But what really has troubled me and has turned me somewhat against his appointment is the way he has put his team together. First of all, it's just an enormous team. I think I pointed out in one post on my website that they now have as many attorneys on that team as the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Rhode Island. Rhode Island is my home state. So it's an enormous office. This is the equivalent of what federal prosecutors need for an entire state, and it's all focused on this. So just the size of it seems to be building a semi-permanent, massive bureaucracy of people whose job it is not necessarily to investigate, but to actually go after the president and his associates. So that troubled me. Then you do have this issue that a lot of, I don't know if it's all of them, but certainly many of the prosecutors who have joined the team have histories of exceedingly aggressive prosecutions that have been overturned eventually by the courts. I think one of them was the Enron prosecutor or the Arthur Anderson prosecutor and things like that. And third, you have people who are overwhelmingly Democrat donors and obvious sympathizers. Now, if Mueller was really concerned about protecting not just the actual integrity of his team, but the perception of integrity, and as we know, that's very important. If he is supposed to be independent, you would think that he would have a more independent, politically independent sort of group there. So these things all together have been extremely troubling to me. And then you add on top of it the fact that the leaks do not appear to have stopped. Now, whether they're actual leaks or the newspapers have invented them, I don't know. But we've had a series of claims in the media based on anonymous sources close to the team who are talking about what they're investigating, who they're investigating, et cetera. So you put it all together, and it's not a good situation in my estimation.
No, and you think about the close relationship between Jim Comey and Bob Mueller. That in itself should have been a disqualifier, I think. But do you think people just weren't aware of that?
Well, you raise a good point. At the get-go, there's a question of whether Mueller was a good appointment, because soon after he was appointed, after James Comey was fired as FBI director, or I should say, once Comey was fired as FBI director, it then became apparent, I should say, that his conversations, Comey's conversations with the president, could be subject to the special counsel investigation. The problem there is that Comey and Mueller are good friends, both professionally and reportedly personal friends. So how can you have the supposedly independent special counsel investigating events where his close friend is one of the key witnesses? And once that came out, I think that should have been grounds for Mueller to recuse himself or to be removed. The special counsel, it's not a law, it's actually a regulation. The special counsel regulation lists as one of the grounds for removal of the special counsel is conflict of interest. And I think it is a clear conflict of interest if the special counsel is investigating the interactions between James Comey and Donald Trump. I don't see how Robert Mueller can be the special counsel, because that's a conflict of interest based on the personal relationship that they have. So that is, I wish I had mentioned that the first time you asked the question. That is a very significant development that really, it got raised in the press and then dropped, and they've moved on to other things.
Yeah, so when it was raised in the press, and we were talking about this, I have a little bit of knowledge about Bob Mueller because my husband is former FBI. So I knew a lot. I knew something about how he operated, and I personally never thought that he was a good choice for a lot of reasons. But all right, so it comes out in the press that they have this close relationship, and everybody's sort of gobsmacked, I guess I could say. That was a pretty big story. And then, but the next step, it seems to me that someone should have asked him to recuse himself. Someone should have done something. Who should have done something? Instead of just having it reported, I agree with you. That the iron we needed to strike then. Why didn't someone do something, and who might have done something?
Well, I think, Rod Rosenstein is the person who would have done it, because he's the one who appointed him. He's, for that purpose, he's the equivalent of the acting attorney general on Russia-related matters and investigation-related matters. And he should have, investigated that and run with the issue and raised the issue. So he's the person who should have done it. And I think that, there's a question, why wasn't that done? Once it became apparent that, the conversations between Comey and Trump were part of the investigation, then I think something needed to be done. And apparently, at least based on what we know publicly, absolutely nothing is done, and that's been very troubling. And I just think the whole way the special prosecutor came about, if you read the regulations, in order for there to be a appointment, there has to be a finding by whoever's doing the appointment, normally the attorney general, but in this case, Rod Rosenstein, that there were a criminal investigation was warranted. And I'm not sure that finding has ever been made, at least publicly, because this was always, as described by Comey through the time he testified in Congress, and I think it was late May or June, was a counterintelligence investigation. So why was a special counsel appointed at all? The whole way this thing has gone down has been really suspect. But the media, because they want the special counsel not only to harass the Trump administration, but to actually indict people or try to indict people, the media is acting like the special counsel is sacrosanct. that there is nothing you can do, that if anything were to be done to the special counsel, it's a constitutional crisis, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that, the media is very happy. The Democrats are very happy. Republicans who hate Trump are very happy because what you have is a situation that's not supposed to take place in this country where they haven't identified a crime to be investigated. They haven't even said there's a crime to be investigated, yet they appoint this team, which is growing in size, to do nothing but investigate people to try to find a crime. And that's not how we're supposed to work here. Here, the police, the prosecutors investigate and prosecute crimes. They don't find the person and then try to find the crime. I mean, there's a very famous saying by the head of the secret police during Stalin in the Soviet Union, find me the man and I'll find you the crime. And the fact is, if any of our lives were to be subjected to a team of 20 prosecutors plus FBI plus investigators scouring over every aspect of our life, you probably could find some laws broken. And there's a very famous book written by a civil liberties lawyer in the Boston area called 3 Crimes a Day, which is with thousands and thousands and thousands of federal crimes on the books. We all probably violate some of those every day just by leading our lives. And so it's a really bad situation. It's politically motivated. It has morphed into, and I do believe he's right about this, a witch hunt where you have this enormous team of people trying to find a crime. And that's not what it was supposed to be when it started. When it started, it was supposed to be, let's investigate whether there was collusion between the campaign and the Russians. And now it's morphed into something much, much more.
Let me quote from you in your article about Mueller. The article you wrote, now this would be the end of June, Mueller legal team approaching size of entire U.S. Attorney's Office for Rhode Island. Excellent article, but you end it with something is not right here. They're not investigating a crime. They are organizing a search party to find a crime. And I think that's well said. And I want to read something to you that kind of proves your point. We know that the media hates Trump. We know that the left hates Trump, but this comes from a different source, who you mentioned in general. And this is former White House ethics lawyer Richard Painter under George W. Bush. And he now serves as vice chair of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. And he said, if Trump fires Mueller, it should be bye-bye Trump or bye-bye Congress. And he goes on to talk about, everybody's warning him. I have heard lots of people warning President Trump that he better not dare fire Robert Mueller. It would be a disaster. And I say to myself, Professor Jacobs, look, everyone hates him already. What more could they say? Are they going to go after his family? Oh, gee, no, they've already done that. What more could they do if he decided to start the wheels turning to get rid of this whole office and dismantle it?
Well, first, let me say Richard Painter should not be taken seriously, and I've written this. Crew, the organization he's vice chair of, is a pro-Democrat, left-wing organization. The person, he's vice chair of that group. The person who was vice chair before him, who he replaced, was David Brock, who's the opposition researcher for Democrats.
Oh, my
Nobody
goodness.
ever points that out. Nobody knows that. Richard Painter has been screaming treason for 6 months. Richard Painter, in my estimation, should not be taken seriously. But because he was a former Bush administration ethics person, that's what people always lead in with to give him credibility. So I don't think anybody needs to ascribe an authority level to what Richard Painter says.
All right, well, that's interesting.
Going beyond that, yeah.
Man, I did not know that. That's great background. Well, we should put that on our Facebook page, Professor Jacobson, so people can know that. Maybe you can share that with us later. Okay, so what else?
Sure, and so what else can they do? I guess that what they can do is they can impeach him. And the howling would be, you can see it already. Many Republicans are saying, don't fire him or suggesting that. And it's a no-win situation for the administration, because if they let this thing go on the trajectory it is now, it is going to be water torture of them for years. It's going to be essentially freeze the administration's ability to get anything done. If they terminate it, there will be enormous pressure And they may, who knows, they may even get the votes in Congress to impeach. They don't need 100% of Republicans. Every single Democrat, of course, would vote. So they only need to pick off 40 or 30, whatever the number is in the House, Republicans out of 200 plus. So they only need to pick off 10 or 15% of the Republicans, and they have enough for impeachment. So I don't know the way out of this for Trump, but it's just a really bad situation, and it all emanates from the appointment of the special counsel, despite there not being a finding under the regulations that there was, in fact, a crime to be investigated.
Oh, and that might explain, in large part, the anger against General Jeff Sessions, who I consider a very fine man. It distresses me, but you can see the buildup of anger against him because it's a result of his actions that this has all developed. And let's talk about that when we come back. Professor William Jacobson of Cornell University, he's the clinical professor of law there, publisher of legalinsurrection.com, which is a great website for great information. It takes a lot of courage to go counter to the legal culture right now, and Professor Jacobson certainly has that. We'll continue the discussion when we return. Sandyrios in the morning on AFR Talk.
Don't forget to connect with Sandy Rios in the morning on Facebook or email Sandy at sandy@afr.net. That's sandy@afr.net. Sandy Rios in the morning on American Family Radio.
Sandy Rios back with you. Well, these are turbulent times. The president has been in office for 6 months now, so lots of things are changing. We talked yesterday about Anthony Scaramucci being the new communications director. Sarah Huckabee Sanders moving into the role that Sean Spicer had. This morning, there's a report that Rex Tillerson is reportedly debating resigning as Secretary of State. Part of it says that he's upset about the president's discussion publicly and criticism of Attorney General Sessions. But I also know that Tillerson has sort of defied the president on issues like Iran, the Iran deal, and also in the handling of the issue of Qatar in the Middle East. And we can go into that in more detail, but the problem is that Tillerson, I love his command. I have to say, his presence and his command, but he is not on the same page in policy with the president. So you're going to see a lot of turmoil. We just have to pray that it comes down in the right way. And right now, let's talk about the turmoil in regard to Attorney General Sessions, who, of course, was a senator in Alabama, winsome and powerful in his own way. I used to say he was Ted Cruz before Ted Cruz because of his fight against the out-of-control immigration system, whether it was illegal or just the out-of-control, bringing into 1 million people a year that illegally, and the issuance of HB1 visas to cut Americans, natural-born Americans, out of the workforce and technology, and on it goes. He's been a champion on that, and I think since he's been a nominated Attorney General and since he recused himself, he has turned his attentions to that issue. And he has single-handedly, you heard him describe, he has no U.S. attorneys and he has hardly any staff. So he's, waging a one-man war, it seems, to do what he can do to turn back the tide, at least on the issue that he knows so well, which is immigration. But it's certainly true that when he recused himself, it sent things in a mess. And we have a mess that's much greater than what I described. Professor William Jacobson is my guest. He's a clinical professor of law at Cornell Law School, publisher of Legal Insurrection. Professor Jacobson, I'm hearing mixed things about the recusal. Giuliani agreed with Sessions and said, I would have recused myself as well. What did he have to recuse himself? Was that a wise move? Was that the thing to do if you're a man of integrity? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'm not sure he was required to do it, that there's any law that required him to. There is a regulation that talks about government attorneys not being involved in matters where they have, a personal friendship with the people being investigated, which, of course, is the point I was making about Robert Mueller. But those talk about criminal investigation. And at the time Sessions recused himself, it was not clear there was a criminal investigation going on. In fact, based on James Comey's testimony, there wasn't. It was a counterintelligence investigation. So I'm not sure he needed to, at least at that time. But there is also the appearance. And so I think it's a close call. I don't think he was required to. On the other hand, I could see why he might feel there's an appearance of some sort of conflict based upon his support for the president during the campaign, based upon his own testimony before Congress, where Sessions might himself be part of the investigation or a subject of the investigation. So I think it was a tough call, which is why I think you're seeing the anger from Trump. I think it was a week or so ago, saying, had I known that he would have to recuse himself or would recuse himself, I never would have appointed him. And I think that they're probably, I think Jeff Sessions was a good pick. I agree with you. I think he's done a good job, although I don't agree with his civil forfeiture position. But by and large, I think he's somebody who really gets what the problem is. But what didn't happen is nobody, I think, expected the Russia mania to go on as long and as far as it did. I think Trump mistakenly believed, and the people around him believed, that once the election was over, there'd be a month or so of people screaming, but then it would calm down and we'd do like we do with every other presidency, which is even if you don't like the person and you oppose their policies, you don't try to literally disrupt the transition of power. So I don't think they expected it to go the direction that it went. And so I don't think, and I don't remember the exact date when Sessions was nominated by Trump, but I think that it was something that nobody really thought through. Where is this thing going to go? And is Sessions going to be able to stay in the position, and what might that mean? I think when people look back upon the history of the Trump administration, I think Jeff Sessions recusing himself is going to be, at least as of this point in time, the single biggest influencer of how the administration went. Now, obviously, we've got time. Other things could happen, but as of now, that has probably been the single most significant event of the administration because it put into motion this seemingly endless, wide-ranging attempt to find a crime by the Muller team. And that, I think, is the defining moment in the administration. So I understand Trump's frustration, and I understand that it all goes back to the fact that if he hadn't appointed Sessions, he had appointed somebody else, that he wouldn't be in this situation now with this special counsel who seems seemingly out of control special counsel.
Let me read something because I want to move on to what we can do, what can be done. But before I do that, Lloyd Marcus is a black conservative who wrote a really interesting article for the Daily Caller, and this is what he said. He says, Sessions stepping aside from the FBI Trump-Russia investigation was the equivalent of bringing an olive branch to a gunfight. Sessions did not win any goodwill from leftists for his unnecessary and unwise decision to step aside. Quite the opposite, leftists saw Sessions recusing himself as a sign of weakness, blood in the water. And then he says, remarkably, some Republicans still naively believe they will not be trashed by fake news media if they can prove they are fair-minded good guys who seek to work with Democrats. Meanwhile, Democrats and fake news media interpret Republicans extending olive branches as weakness to be exploited, an opportunity to plunge the dagger into Trump and Republicans' political hearts. I kind of agree with him. I don't know if you do. It just seems
I think that the Democrats and some never Trump Republicans decided immediately upon Trump's election that they were going to do everything within their power to get him out of office or prevent him from taking office. A defining moment for me in the way I looked at this, because I didn't support Trump during the primaries. I supported Ted Cruz. But a defining way that I've looked at this is when Democrats, some never Trump Republicans, and parts of the legal community tried to disrupt the Electoral College. I've never heard of that happening, at least not in our lifetimes, where you literally try to prevent the transition of power because you don't like a election result. And when they tried to intimidate the electors, when they tried to lobby them, when they were emailing them and harassing them, to me that said this is so far beyond what is the norm that they pose a significant threat to our republic. That somebody who would intimidate an elector to change his or her vote against the popular vote in that district, to me, is really a threat to our republic. Now, it didn't pan out. I don't think any electors changed their votes, but they tried. And that goes to the point that you were making, or the person was making in that clip, that the being nice to people who would try to prevent the peaceful transition of power, which is the Democrats and some never-Trump Republicans, is not going to work because they don't honor. I mean, as much as people, opposed Obama and Obamacare and other things, I don't recall anybody trying to prevent the transition of power, trying to obstruct Obama's ability to staff his administration. Now, there were individuals who might have been opposed, but by and large, statistically, Obama, by this point, had far more people in place to run his administration. There are entire, sub-departments of major agencies that don't have a single person appointed by Trump. Now, part of that's Trump's fault. He hasn't nominated as large a number of people as in the past. But even if he had, they are not making their way through the pipeline. The Democrats in the Senate are stalling for procedural maneuvers. Almost everybody who is nominated by Trump, even people they end up voting for, they make the process. There are procedural rules on debate and things like that where you can stretch out an individual's process for days or weeks. And you do that for every single one, and you get in a situation where there are numerous, I think there's still 14 or 15 judicial nominations who haven't even made it through the Senate Judiciary Committee because each nomination takes so long, even if the person's eventually approved. And so what you have is you have had a full-scale attempt to prevent the peaceful transition of power, which is continuing to this day. And that's what makes this whole situation very different than anything I've ever seen, very different than the opposition to Obama. And it's really unprecedented, and I think a very worrisome development.
I do too, and I think Senator Sessions, oh dearie me, we'll have to call him back. I think Senator Sessions has been part of that Senate culture where I've said repeatedly they just don't seem to understand. I think the American people understand that we are on the brink here of losing our country in many, many ways. And they are still busy, doing the gentleman's exchange where the gentleman from such and abiding by all of their rules when chaos and lawlessness is breaking out about them, and also the willful destruction of the American institutions. And so it's a serious problem. I just find myself wondering, and I hope Professor Jacobson joins us again here. I just wonder if something can be done at this point. What can we do? What can we do to stop this investigation, which is out of control by Bob Mueller? If the president can't do it, can someone under him do it? Could General Sessions do something? Could he unrecuse himself? Could he take the bull by the horns? And could Senator McConnell actually sort of change the rules in the Senate so that nominations could go through and there could be U.S. attorneys and staff for the Attorney General to actually get the work done? Those are the things that I would ask. Professor Jacobs, we only have a couple of minutes.
Yes, so I'm here. I don't know what happened. The call dropped.
Let me give it to you because I'm talking about we only have a couple of minutes. What in the world could happen that you could see could sort this thing out? What person, what place, what appointment?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think this is one of those situations where there is no way out for the Trump administration. There's no good way out, I should say. And I think that allowing the Mueller investigation to continue the way it's going is the easy choice. There's no question about it. Because whatever the repercussions are, they're months, maybe even years down the road, as opposed to the repercussion now of firing him or of firing Sessions, getting a new AG in place who says we no longer need a special counsel. So I don't know the way out. I wish I knew the way out. This all emanates, as I was indicating, from a desire of Democrats and some never-Trump Republicans to prevent the administration Donald Trump from being able to operate, to staff itself, and to conduct the business of the country. And I think this is an unprecedented and very dangerous situation we're in, where we've gone beyond political objections, and we are now trying, 6 months after inauguration still, to prevent the president from fully taking power.
How much danger do you think the president and his family are in?
Well, I don't necessarily mean that they are in physical danger, but I think his administration is in danger of being paralyzed. And that is the goal of the Democrats. The goal of the Democrats and Republicans who hate Trump is to completely paralyze the administration, to put it in a position as if it never existed. And they're getting very close to that. They're getting very, very close to that.
But not yet. So we remain hopeful.
Not yet,
At least
not
I do
yet.
today.
And I think if I had advice for Trump, it would be start getting things done. And Mitch McConnell, start pushing people through the system.
Yes.
Start getting some success.
Forget the silly rules. Change the rules and get these people in place so that we can fight back. That's my view of it. Professor William Jacobson, again, of Cornell Law School. Thank you so much, Professor Jacobson. It's great to have you this morning. I hope that we can do this again sometime soon.
Look forward to it.
All right, this is Sandy Rios in the morning on AFR Talk.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association.